Hello, folks. Welcome to Holding On with Holder. On this show, I interview interesting people to discuss interesting topics. My name is Steve Holder, and I am your host. With me today, I have Jessica Bell, teacher, minister, and an inspiration to others. We will be talking about her background, her interest, and her thoughts on current events. Welcome, Jessica. Thanks for being on my show.
Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it.
Well, you are quite welcome. First of all, tell us your background. Who are you?
That's such an interesting question. I never really know what to say, but like he said, my name is Jessica Bell. I'm currently in Kansas City, Missouri. I am a teacher. I am a youth advocate. I'm a minister. I love doing community activism, and I am also a host of a podcast called Unmute Your Mic. So that pretty much sums up me.
Okay. I watched one of your episodes recently, and I enjoyed it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Now, are you a mother?
I am not a mother. No children.
Okay. And married, single?
I'm dating somebody, but I am single. I was married in the past, but I'm no longer married.
Okay. And you say you are a minister?
Yes. I actually went to ministry school about 6 or 7 years ago. I'm really passionate about youth ministry and really making the word of God more relatable for youth and people in my community. I think it's really important that a lot of the younger generation really get to have a personal relationship with God compared to just seeing him as like this dictator that they're afraid of. I believe that a lot of the reasons why a lot of youth and children go astray is because they don't have a solid foundation.
That's true. That's true. So tell us about your motivation to become a minister, and what was your thought process and what got you to that?
To be honest, it was something I was kind of running from for a long time. I love working with youth and children, but when I first started going to church, I was serving and doing a bunch of different things and kind of trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do in church. And one of the things that really stood out was I really loved having a conversation with people. I loved leading like the small groups and the Bible study groups. And I just realized that my personal relationship with God changed me so much that I knew if I could introduce people to God the way that I knew him, he would rock their world and change their life. And so I decided to go to ministry school because I wanted to have a solid foundation in order to do that. But more importantly, I really wanted to find a way to be relatable. And I knew I needed to take a leadership role in order to do that. And so that was part of the reason as to why I decided to go to school and pursue that a little deeper.
Okay. What would you like to say to people that don't know Christ?
You should know him, but I mean, yes, but other than that, I think one of the things I really always try to tell people is that it is a relationship, and it is a relationship with a God that always has your back, protects you, and loves you. And so if you approach and have an open heart and knowing and having that kind of a relationship, it's a lot easier. Also, it's really important to know that you're never alone once you have a relationship with Christ. And I feel like in this day and age, the stuff that's been going on with the pandemic and everything like that, a lot of people have felt really lonely and felt like they didn't have anybody. And so we're all looking and seeking for ways to connect and to have, that human contact. And so I think it's so important. For me, it was very important to know that I had that relationship with Christ, and that no matter what I was going through, there was somebody always in my corner. And that is how God has been for me.
And that's a good thing to know. That's a good
Definitely.
I always say, if you want to make sure God is on your side, make sure you're on God's side.
That part right there. That's good. That's so true. Yes.
And you are a teacher.
Yes, I am a teacher.
Okay. And what convinced you to go into teaching?
The same reason, almost the same reason I went into ministry. So when I did decide to go to ministry school, I decided that I wanted to focus more specifically on youth. A couple of years ago, I was doing prison ministry. And so I was going inside the prisons and talking to people who were incarcerated. And I also was going inside of juvenile detention centers as well. And so one of the things I really saw was when I would go into the prisons, I would always think, I wish I could have talked to this person 5 or 10 years ago. And so then I started going into juvenile detention centers, and I was like, I'm talking to like 13 or 14-year-olds, and I'm like, man, I wish I would have got to talk to this person 5 or 10 years ago. And I just started peeling back the layers. And so when I decided to teach, I really focused on the younger age group, more of like the kindergarten age, because I wanted to be able to make an impact very early on in their life. A lot of the people that I talked to when I did prison ministry, they all had a similar story of feeling like they didn't have somebody that they could talk to. They didn't have somebody who would pour into them. And so as a teacher, it allows that, it kind of lets me, it lets me get a hold of them earlier, but it also is like, it's my ministry. So even though I'm not teaching them, quote unquote, the Bible, I'm able to still install biblical principles inside of them. And so I just pray and believe every time I come in contact with the children in my class that there is some seed put into them where, you know, they'll remember that years down the line when they're facing struggle. And, you know, especially a lot of children in my community, they turn into products of their environment. And so we're constantly battling, trying to teach them something in school that they may not be learning at home. And so that is what really encouraged me to say, hey, let me take this time. I really want this to be a career path for me.
Yeah. I like what you said about planting a seed, because sometimes that's what we do. We can't always be the one to water the seed. We can't always be the one to see the seed come to fruit. But you know, it all works out. We do our part and God does his part, right?
Absolutely. And I tell people that all the time. Like, if you want to work in youth development, it is not for the faint of heart, simply because you don't always get to see the product at the end. You know, I have these children for 1 year or a semester, and then sometimes you never see from them again. So if this is the kind of this is not the kind of job where you get that instant gratification. You just have to be walking closely enough to God to say the things he wants you to say to them, and pray that that's something they can take with them as they go on to their next step of life.
Yeah. You and I have some similar experiences. I used to have a prison ministry, so I know what it's like. Walk into that prison and, you know, spread the word, and it can be stressful, but it's also interesting and rewarding. What amazed me about that, sometimes I would hear an inmate tell me, I am glad I was sent to prison, because if I hadn't been here, I'd probably be dead and I wouldn't have accepted Christ either. And that really blew my mind to hear that. It really did.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is so true, because I think that's a testament to show that really God meets us where we're at. And sometimes we have to be slowed down. Sometimes we have to face the consequences of our action. But even then, God loves us so much that he'll still be there. And he's not just like trying to punish you, but even in that, he's trying to help you get back on track and show you that he loves you. And I was just telling somebody that the other day, God is truly a father. So even if he's disappointed, even if we go down a road where he's just like, man, why did you do that? He doesn't leave us. He stays there and says, okay, you may have to reap, you know, the consequences for your actions, but I still love you, and I'm still going to be here to help guide you into that next step or whatever it is that you're going to do after this.
Yeah. That's where the hope comes from. That's where the faith gets put into practice. You know, if we don't have to exercise our faith, then what is it's no good if we don't get a chance to use it, right?
Exactly. Yes. I completely agree with that.
I also used to work at a drug rehab for teenagers, and I know what a challenge that is, working with them. They are not always receptive to what you have to say, as you know.
Yes. Yes, I actually worked as a CASA as well, which is a court appointed special advocate. And so I would go into group homes and I would be working with the children who had court dates, who were in and out of the system. And so that was one of the biggest challenges, was like, sometimes I just wanted to know that something I was saying was clicking or helping them. But a lot of times you do encounter youth that have been so badly hurt and abused and have people come in and out of their life, where they kind of have to wait and see if you're really the real deal, because they're so used to people coming and going. And so, you know, sometimes you feel like you kind of have to prove yourself, but at the same time, it's like you have to realize that there's such a large amount of trauma that has taken place in them that they're kind of just set up to not trust anybody who just comes along. So that's very difficult sometimes, because you feel like you spend more time trying to get them to trust you. But in the midst of that, when they actually do, they will open up to you and tell you, you know, everything. It's just about being patient. And like I said, not getting that instant gratification, because it's not going to happen immediately.
Yeah. And there were quite a few occasions where after I met the parents, I felt like, well, we're talking to the wrong people. You know, the parents are the ones that need to be going through some kind of treatment or counseling or something. You know, I said, well, I understand how the kid got to be here. You know, we had one kid came in. He was 13 years old, and he had a bad habit of stealing cigarettes from the older boys. Of course, smoking wasn't allowed, but you know how that goes. So it got to a point where the older boys were really about to beat him up. And, you know, and come to find out, that kid's daddy took him to Walmart and taught him to shoplift and steal.
Wow.
So that just came natural for that kid. He didn't know any better. You know, so it was a big revelation to him to find out, you know, this ain't cool. Yeah.
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 And I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about children and youth a lot of times being the product of their environment. I don't believe that a child is just born with with like this desire to do wrong inside of them. But a lot of times it's all that they see. And then sometimes they either don't have parents, or the parents they have are doing the same things, like you said, that they're doing. And so they're just simply following a generational pattern. And until something disrupts that pattern, it's just going to keep going, which is why you'll have cycles of family that you see struggle with the same things, because it's just nothing is breaking it. There's nothing that's breaking the chains off of that. There's nothing that's breaking the generational curse that's happening here. And a lot of times people in the outside world who interact with these children, they don't think about that. So they just see a bad child. They just see a child that's uneducated. They just see a child that doesn't want a future. And in all actuality, they don't see one. And it takes somebody, it takes God, it takes people who are willing to go that extra step and show them that there's something else other than what they see in their environment.
Yeah, for a person that has lost all hope, or maybe never had any, believing that things are going to be better, that's pretty much impossible. It's just hard to get through to them that things can be better.
Yeah, and then you can't just tell them things are going to be better. You have to actually show them how it can be. Because if you're living in this destruction and everybody's in gang violence and your parents are gone, or you've lost people and you have so much trauma, somebody just coming and saying, don't worry, keep your head up, that's not going to do anything. And in all theory, it sounds good. It sounds encouraging. But if you tell them that and then they go back home and they've got to fight to get to their house, or they can't wear certain colors, or their dad is incarcerated, the keep your head up is just something that goes in one ear and out of the other, which is why I think it's so important that that mental health is brought into the picture a lot of time. And then there are programs or things in place that actually help children advance in their life, other than us just telling them, because otherwise the cycle can't be broken. And a lot of times, like you said, the parents need to be sitting right next to them in counseling and in therapy.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned generational curses. They do exist. and things just go down through the family line from generation to generation. And, you know, somebody got to break the cycle or it just keeps perpetuating.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And it's heartbreaking to watch. And there's been many times where I've worked with youth, and like you said, then I'll meet the parents and be like, this is it. Yeah. This is the problem. And the sad part about it is that sometimes the parent is not even aware that they're the one who is the problem, because they're passing down this thing. And I think that's really where God comes in. And that's where it turns more into just, oh, I want to help kids. But it's like some things I strongly believe that it's going to take an intervention from God to really make a change. And a lot of times with people who are trying to help youth, we don't know the right words to say. We don't always know the right things to do. You know, you may be able to put them in a program or something like that, but it's going to take having that relationship with God to know exactly how you need to intervene in that person's life. And that was one of the main reasons why I couldn't go into social work. And I really wanted to be like a lawyer, but I was like, you can't use discernment and like as a legal reason why something doesn't feel right. But when you work as like a CASA or when you're a youth advocate, you really have the ability to step into that child's life in a non-official way and be able to do things that lawyers and social workers can't do. Yeah,
absolutely. So what kind of childhood did you have?
I had a easy childhood on paper, I would say. So I, grew up in Kansas City and then moved to Los Angeles. My parents were separated on and off. So they were together and then they would separate and get back together again. As far as like, I didn't experience a high amount of trauma, which I am extremely grateful for. A lot of the things that I experienced were, I would say, basic things. I was bullied in school, which isn't good, but it happens to a lot of people. But I think a lot of any issue that I had in my childhood and it's probably why I'm so passionate about generational curses, is because I believe it was just things being passed down where like maybe my parents didn't know the best way to handle certain situations because it was how it was handled with them. And so growing up, I kind of just felt like there were a lot of territories I was stepping into on my own. And I didn't really realize that until I started having a relationship with God. And it was certain things I couldn't go to my parents about because I already knew how they were going to react to it. And I was in that space where I was like, okay, so I know how they're going to react, but I would love to react differently to get a different outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And how would you say your experiences as a child still affect you today?
So when I got married a couple years ago, and so in that marriage was the biggest reflection of things that had not been perfect in my childhood. And so I didn't realize for a long time that when you pick your mate, when you do stuff like that, a lot of times you either pick from your fears or you pick from a healthy place. And I believe when I got married, I was picking from places of fear. Like I didn't see good marriage growing up. And so I wanted so badly to have a good marriage, but it's like sometimes it's like that thing where you're like, oh, I'm never going to be like this person. And then you turn out exactly like that person because you're so busy trying to be not them that you actually become them. And so I knew when I had gotten married, I was like, I don't want my parents' marriage. I don't want dysfunction. I don't want arguments. I don't want mental health issues and that kind of thing. And I literally saw myself I literally lived my parents' marriage. And so I started, after I separated and got divorced, I started going to counseling. And I remember my first counseling session, I thought that it was going to be all about my ex-husband and how horrible he was and all the things he did to me. And all the counselor wanted to talk about was how my relationship was with my parents. And I remember being like, what does that have to do anything? Like, I'm here because I got divorced. But it really showed me that, like, wherever there's a lack, and if you don't feel that lack or heal that lack with a relationship with God, you choose from those places. So I just realized that a lot of the life choices I was making was simply responses to things I felt like I didn't have as a child. And it wasn't until I really started having a personal relationship with God that I was able to kind of go back in and start adjusting some of those things, because I knew I could see then that it wasn't right. It was like the light was turned on, and I was able to like go back and look at my life and say, okay, I would like to adjust this. I would like to change that. But it's a lot of hard work, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. What would you say has been your biggest challenge?
I think my biggest challenge so far in my life has been being first generation. So what I mean by that is there's a lot of things that I'm trying to accomplish in my life that I have not seen accomplished in my family. So a lot of times, and other people who are more, I would say, privileged, they kind of just get things. It's like things are just handed to you. Stuff is just kind of set up. And my life isn't like that. You know, even something as like buying a house, you know, like I've never lived in a house. Like, you know, we grew up in apartments and just certain things. So a lot of territories, like I said, that I'm walking into, I have not seen anybody else walk into them. Not anybody that I personally know. And so I say the only thing probably that my family did have was, at least like on my dad's side of the family, there are a lot of pastors and ministers and that kind of thing. But a lot of things I was just trying to walk into in life, I have hit roadblocks because I haven't had someone to say like, follow me, this is how I did it. And so a lot of it is me paving the way so that when I do have children or my siblings or anybody who comes behind me, it's a little bit easier for them to walk. But that means I've got to do a lot of the heavy lifting and the digging and the breaking off the chains and breaking off the curses so that I can keep going, because I refuse to only go as far as I've seen the people go who have gone in front of me.
So who are your heroes?
So people I know or people I don't know or a combination? That is a great question. I really, my grandpa is somebody who is like kind of a silent hero for me. He doesn't say a lot, but when he does, it's very important. And so he has been somebody that I have looked up to for my entire life. And more so simply because he, what he says he means. So like we would always joke growing up, if my grandpa said he was proud of us, we knew we were really doing something right. And so he has been somebody that I've looked up to for a long time, because I've always just kind of wanted to live a life that I knew he would be proud of me. And so thankfully my grandpa is still here, and so he's a huge hero of mine. As far as people like that I don't know, I know this is, people always laugh at me, but I'm a huge Tupac fan, and I I absolutely love some of his like activism things that he did in the community, even though I think he's a perfect example of somebody who didn't live a quote unquote like holy life, but did the best with what he had. And he was able to touch generations in a way that a lot of people have not since. And even with his life being imperfect, that was part of his story. And so he really inspired me as a youth. And even now, his poetry, it's a way I actually write programming, and I actually wrote a program based off of Tupac's life that I would go and teach to youth. And a lot of like ministers and pastors would look at me crazy because they're like, Tupac and church, they don't go together. But I think a lot of times we miss connecting with a lot of youth because we want to act like we are up here and they're down here, or they're, you know. So if you're able to use people's imperfections to teach other people, that is the perfect avenue to reach a certain crowd that a lot of us, we don't generally tap into.
Yeah, that's true. So what would you say, what do you think about the present state of the world?
The present state of the world to me is heartbreaking. I feel like there's so much division, and there is a lack of grace. I feel like everybody's so busy trying to be right, and everybody is so busy trying to pick a side that we've lost that sense of unity. I will say it's not like the world has always been perfect. There's been division from the beginning of time. There's been racism, there's been political division forever. But I think we're really in a state now where we have so many more things at our fingertips. I think social media is both a gift, but it's absolutely a curse if it's not used correctly. And so a lot of times things that have been put in place to bring us together has caused more division. And I think until we're able to have conversations like the one that me and you are having, just able to have conversations with people and get to know them and say, oh, you're not that bad. Oh, you're more than your skin color. You're more than your political choice. You're more than your religion, and be able to have conversations. A lot of stuff is not going to change. I really think that we've kind of lost, we haven't lost God I want to say we've lost God in the process. Like, I feel like a lot of things that are happening now, they don't have a biblical foundation. And what you have is a bunch of sheep that are just wandering, and everyone's trying to create their own religion and create their own sense of peace. And I think the one thing we're missing is the love and the unity that comes with serving God and having a true relationship with him.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to get better anytime soon?
I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I do think it will get better. I think one thing that 2020 showed a lot of us is that we can be stripped from all the things that we think are normal. And it's caused a lot of people to have to face who they are, face what they want to do with their life. And it's also, I believe, made us appreciate people more, because I know some people who I know who are like the most introverts are now like, I can't wait to be around people, just because we've been like secluded for so long. So I do think it will be better. It will get better, but I think media plays a huge part in making sure that we don't get better.
Yeah, that's true. Can we talk about racism?
We absolutely can.
Do you think we're making progress in the United States, or is it better than it was, let's say, a decade ago, or staying the same, better, worse? What do you think?
If we're just going back a decade, I would almost say I think it's the same. And here's why. I just think now we're able to see it more. Back in the day, you didn't have cell phones to capture these moments. There wasn't social media to display stuff. So when things were happening behind the scenes, it was kind of like whoever you told, and that was it. And so I think a lot of times people think racism is better because there's no signs that say colored only and whites only. But in all actuality, that actually is what makes it worse, because it happens so discreetly. Yeah. It's the having issues getting a job if your name is a certain name on the resume. It's not being able to purchase a house in a certain community, and having to get somebody to purchase a house for you that is not your race because they don't want that race in that community. It's the inability to get a business loan, and so I think it's the things that happen more discreetly that are really what's dangerous. I would prefer someone just come up to me and say, hey, I don't like you because you're Black, because then at least I know. But it's when you have that boss that doesn't like you, that's doing things that are going to get you fired. And then it's the fear, I believe, that comes along with racism, of even interacting with the police. And so it's like, I feel like in those moments, it creates such a fear and tension on both sides that you almost don't even know how much of it is racism and how much of it is the cops are afraid of us because they think that we hate them. And then we're afraid of them because we think that they hate us. And now our interactions with the police are so terrible. And so I feel like it's just the I feel like it is the same as a decade ago. I feel like it's the same as when Dr. King was murdered. I just feel like it looks different.
Yeah.
And that's the scary part.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts on white supremacy and white privilege?
I feel like I know that white privilege exists, but I also think what people don't understand is that there's also the privilege of class. I feel like there's a lot of class privilege. Even what happened recently at the Capitol, a lot of it was not just white, so like white privilege. A lot of it was the privilege of those class and the privilege of the people who were supporting that person. And so I think a lot of times when we look at white privilege, it's not something that we need to look at people at and like punish them for, because the same way I can't help that I'm Black is the same way you can't help that you're not. Mm-hmm. And so though I know it's real and it exists, similar to, like I said, with some of those other things, there are just certain privilege that I believe white people get to walk in that just comes with them being who they are. Mm. And it's not anything that, I mean, I believe that some people do use it intentionally. Yeah. In an evil manner. And then there are people who just can't help it. That's their white, but they are walking in certain privilege. And I think what will be the beautiful thing is when people start using that privilege to help, to go back and help and get others and say, hey, I'm going to use this privilege as a way to shine light on people who don't receive that same privilege.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think systemic racism is a real thing?
Yes, I definitely do. I feel just like systemic racism is a real thing. I also believe that there are things set in place to hold certain groups of people back. Oh, most definitely. Because I'm passionate about prison ministry and incarcerated youth, I know that the school to prison pipeline is set up specifically to get younger Black people incarcerated at a age so that they get a record, and then they're never able to truly become what they're supposed to become, because now they're walking around life with this felony charge or, that kind of thing. And so I definitely believe, even working in the court systems, I saw things take place where I knew it was intentionally setting back people of color. And if you do not have the finances, if you cannot get the right kind of lawyers, if even public defenders, like God help them, but a lot of time public defenders set people up to fail because they're so overworked. A lot of them do not get their cases until the day of. And how can you properly defend somebody that you don't know and you've never had a conversation with? And then the most people who are with a public defender are people who are either of color or people who don't have the income, which goes back to there being a class privilege as well. Because if you cannot afford to get a decent lawyer, then you're saying that you're guilty for something you're not, just because you don't want to go to trial and go to jail for 25 years, so you'll take 5.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think about the organization called Black Lives Matter? Not the movement, but that particular organization.
So I love the phrase Black Lives Matter. I believe that it's very important. I don't agree with everything that Black Lives Matter organization stands for, as far as when you look at the organization and read like their mission statement and that kind of thing. And I don't, I want to be fair. I don't know the people who have put Black Lives Matter together. I don't know where they're receiving their money or their donations and that kind of thing. I believe what they did last summer with George Floyd and everything that took place was very historic and pivotal and important to shine a light on some of the things that have happened. And so for that, I appreciate the organization, because I truly believe you can support a movement and not 100% agree with everything that may be taking place in that organization. And I think that goes with everything. So I think what they did this summer was what we needed as a people, to kind of shine the light and say, hey, wake up. The protest that took place across the world, based off of a lot of the things that this movement started, was very important. So as a whole, I do respect the organization, but I know that there are probably some things that take place that I don't completely agree with, but I would say that goes with almost everything.
Yeah, that's true. So where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
5 years from now, I, God willing, have children. I'm married. On a personal level, on a business level, I would love for my podcast to be gaining some traction and really more known, because it's similar to yours, actually, where it's about people being able to share and tell their stories. And I think that's really important. I would love to be teaching, but in my own environment. I would love to have a school or a learning center myself, and really just doing what it is that God has called me to do. And so I leave that open. I know it's probably going to be something youth development, and I am very excited about that.
Okay. Well, good. Is there anything else you want to tell people about you, or what you want to do, or what do you want to have? Anything at all? I'm a person who loves people. I believe that God can redeem anything that has happened in your life. That you are never too far gone, you are never too far lost, and your story is important. And so, speak up, share, and use the things that you've gone through to help others. And if we do that for each other, the world will be a much better place. Absolutely. And you want to tell people about your website and your podcast and how they can find you online?
Yes, so you can find my podcast at unmuteyourmic.org. There you can subscribe. You can see my previous episodes. And then you can always follow me personally on social media. My name is Jessica Bell on Facebook and Jess_Christina on Instagram.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for coming and talking with me this evening. I have enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm honored. I love it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And you have yourself a wonderful evening, and I will send you this as soon as it gets online, okay?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
God bless.
God bless you.